HOA cops pointed a gun on me, not knowing I'm an elite Navy SEAL. Asterisk, it was supposed to be a quiet weekend. I had just come back from deployment and finally got a chance to visit the house I'd bought years ago in a peaceful lakeside, community-managed. Of course, by an overly ambitious HOA. I hadn't been there in months. But I was excited to relax, recharge, and enjoy the solitude. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a few residents eyeing me suspiciously. I shrugged it off, typical nosy neighbors. But within an hour, things took a wild turn. While I was unloading my gear, black SUV pulled up, no lights, no markings, nothing official looking. Out stepped two men in tactical gear with HOA security patches awkwardly slapped onto their chest vests. One of them was holding what looked like a real firearm, finger on the trigger. The other pointed at me and barked, "You don't belong here." I calmly replied, "This is my house." The guy with the gun shouted back, "You're trespassing. Show ID or get on the ground." Now look, I've dealt with war zones, cartel ambushes, and high-stakes hostage rescues. But never had I expected some wannabe rent-a-cops to pull a weapon on me. In my own driveway. I raised my hand slowly, not out of fear, but out of training. I kept my voice calm and firm. Put the weapon down. You're making a big mistake. Instead of listening, the one with the gun steps closer and tries to shove me to the ground. That's when instincts kicked in less than a second. I disarmed him, spun him around, and had his own arm pinned behind his back before he knew what hit him. The other guy went for his radio, but before he could say anything, I growled, "You. Call for backup, and I'll call the real authorities." I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to escalate, but I wasn't going to let this slide either, turns out. The HOA had decided to create its own neighborhood patrol, a bunch of untrained, self-appointed vigilantes who thought they were above the law. They'd seen me arrive, didn't recognize me, and instead of calling the real police, they took matters into their own hands. And here's the kicker. They didn't even check the homeowner registry. My name was still on it. I was still a resident in good standing. I just saw a man in military fatigues, assumed I was trouble, and went full Rambo. I let the guy up after removing the mag from his weapon and tossing it aside and told them, "Both, this will be the last time you'll ever point a weapon at a veteran. If you're lucky, the cops will deal with you before I press federal charges." They tried to apologize, stammering excuses like, "We thought you were a threat and you didn't check in at the HOA gate." I didn't care and called the sheriff's department right then and there. When the real deputies arrived, I gave them a full statement and provided security footage from my cameras. Both HOA officers were detained. Turns out, they weren't even licensed to carry or detain anyone. One of them had a past weapons charge, the other, a YouTube degree in private security. The HOA president tried to do damage control, offering to handle it internally. I wasn't having it. I filed a formal complaint, called in legal counsel, and informed my chain of command because, yeah, even off-duty, Navy SEALs don't tolerate being threatened by amateurs. A month later, the HOA was slapped with multiple lawsuits. Their so-called patrol program was shut down. The two men who pointed weapons at me, charged with impersonating officers and unlawful threat with a firearm, and me, I got a public apology, full HOA dues waived for the year, and a personal visit from the county sheriff, who said, "We're sorry, sir. No one should have treated you that way, especially someone who's served. Here's the lesson. Respect goes both ways. You don't get to pretend to be the law just because you live in a gated community. And you definitely don't point a gun at a Navy SEAL unless you're ready for consequences. Some people think a uniform gives them power, but real power is not in a badge or a weapon. It's in discipline. Training. Integrity asterisk, the incident didn't just blow over quietly. Word spread fast throughout the neighborhood. Some neighbors were shocked, others not surprised at all. Apparently these two HOA cops had been intimidating residents for months. They'd harassed delivery drivers, told guests to check in before entering, and even threatened fines for kids riding bikes too fast. One elderly veteran down the street actually came by my place 2 days later. His name was Mr. Connors, retired Air Force. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "I've been waiting for someone to shut those boys down." He told me they once threatened to write him up for flying an American flag without prior HOA approval. That flag was on his porch for over 20 years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That was the final straw for me. I wasn't just going to file a complaint and walk away. I launched a full-scale response. I began documenting every abuse of authority, collecting stories from other neighbors, and compiling them into a detailed report. I got in touch with a lawyer who specialized in HOA abuse cases, and we began building a class action case. Within a few weeks, more than 20 residents joined in. Then, something unexpected happened. A local reporter caught wind of the story. He'd received a tip about the HOA militia that got dismantled by an off-duty Navy SEAL, he asked. For an interview, I agreed, but on one condition. I wouldn't give my name, and I wouldn't talk about my service in detail. The story aired. It went viral. Viewers across the country were stunned by what had happened. The sheriff's office issued an official statement condemning the HOA's use of unauthorized private enforcement. The state licensing board launched an investigation into their supposed security company, which, by the way, wasn't even legally registered. And the HOA president? She resigned 2 days later. But I wasn't done. I ran for the HOA board at the next election, and I won by a landslide. First order of business: remove every single policy that allowed power-hungry amateurs to enforce anything beyond parking regulations. We replaced the security patrol with real vetted local officers under contract from the county. We installed proper neighborhood signage, launched a respectful neighborhood watch system, and offered training on civil rights, de-escalation, and emergency protocols. No more guns, no more threats, just peace. It's funny how life works. Came to that house looking for rest. Instead, I found a community in need of protection from the very people who claimed to be protecting it. I didn't use my title, my background, or my combat experience to intimidate anyone. But when pushed, I used everything I'd been taught, not just to defend myself, but to restore order. And now, that same porch I stood on when a weapon was pointed at me. It's where I drink my morning coffee, wave at passing neighbors, and watch their kids ride bikes safely down the street, no fake patrol cars in sight. To anyone who thinks wearing tactical pants and a patch gives them the right to play cop, just remember, you never know who you're messing with, because sometimes the quietest guy on the block is the one who's trained to walk into hell and come back smiling. A few months later, I got a letter in the mail from one of the former HOA officers. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a short note that read, "You didn't have to ruin my life. I was just trying to do my job. You embarrassed me in front of the whole county. No apology, no accountability, just blame." I sat there, rereading that line, "Ruin my life." Let me tell you something. I've seen lives ruined. I've held brothers in my arms as the fight drained from their eyes. I've stared down men who would rather die than surrender. I've watched good people go through unthinkable hell for a cause bigger than themselves. So no, I didn't ruin your life. You ruined your own the moment you picked up a gun you weren't trained to carry and pointed it at someone. You didn't know just because you felt like it. What really stunned me was how many people quietly came forward over the following weeks. A single mom who had been fined $200 because her trash bin was out 30 minutes too early. A teenager who'd been followed home for not having a community-issued sticker on his windshield. A disabled vet whose service dog was nearly banned from the community pool. All of them had just taken it. Thought that's how it worked. They'd forgotten one of the most important things we fight for in this country: freedom from intimidation. From the abuse of small-time authority, so I made it my mission not just to restore order, but to teach people how to stand up. We held open forums, town hall meetings, brought in legal experts to explain homeowners' rights. I told them, you pay dues, you have rights, you have a voice. One day, an elderly woman stood up at one of the meetings and said, "I feel safer now than I have in 5 years. Not because of the security, but because someone finally stood up to them. That hit me, because in war zones, we fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. And sometimes, back home, the mission is exactly the same. Eventually, the neighborhood changed, not just the rules, but the spirit. People started helping each other more, watching out for each other. Not in a patrolling, clipboard-carrying kind of way, but the kind of way that says, I've got your back. The kids who used to be yelled at for skating on the sidewalk. We built them a skate ramp in the community park. The veteran who was told to take down his flag, we hosted a flag-raising ceremony in his honor, and that HOA board seat I'd won. I never ran for a second term. I didn't need to. The next set of board members were honest, clear-headed, and genuinely focused on the